This is my last show before the election, obviously. By this time tomorrow, the polls will be closing, and then, in what I promise you will be a no-holds-barred outsiders on Sunday morning, we will dissect, analyse, probe, and either celebrate or lament the result. So let me give you my thoughts as we enter the final straits. And it is this. In late 2022 and early 2023, when Albanese's plans for the Voice referendum were being finalised, all the opinion polls pointed to an outright victory for the Voice, with some polls showing support for the Yes campaign as high as 80%. In my gut, I knew this could not be true, and I knew that if presented with the cold, hard facts of what such a perversion of the Westminster system would mean, I firmly believed that a majority of the Australian population would say no to the Voice proposal, regardless of how much emotional pressure was applied by the left, the ABC, the schools, the unis, the mainstream media, and the woke chattering classes. I argued in the Spectator Australia magazine and frequently on Outsiders here on Sky News Australia that at its very heart, the Uluru Statement from the heart, despite all the hoopla surrounding it, was a racist document. Racism is, very simply, any attempt by whatever authorities to judge and either elevate or denigrate individuals purely based on the colour of their skin and their genetic makeup. And racism is evil. I was right. It took Peter Dutton and the Liberal Party many months to arrive at that same conclusion. The Nationals got there long before them, as did One Nation. But once the Libs decided to oppose the Voice, they were unbeatable. Rather than pandering to the left, the bedwetters, they sidelined those within the party who had supported the Voice and concentrated on persuading the great common sense, silent majority of Australians to vote no. Over the course of several months, a 70 to 80% yes vote magically transformed into a 60% no vote, a staggering achievement. The common sense silent majority were not to be intimidated by the sneering, arrogant, patronising woke left. That 61% majority was not fabricated. Nobody conjured it up out of thin air. As I had suspected all along, it was already there, lying, buried like cicadas in the soil, just waiting for the right moment to pop out and sing. And sing they did. Albanese's great dream lay shattered, and his prime ministership, to all intents and purposes, should have been over. All the Liberals had to do was to maintain the momentum of that astonishing victory through to tomorrow. They had every opportunity. In Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, they had found a superhero, that rarest of political creatures, a person of warmth and genuine charisma who could speak common sense without spin or obfuscation. A mum, a genuine child of assimilation. Her own mum, a smart, wonderful Aboriginal woman from the remotest corners of the outback. Her dad, a razor-sharp and entertaining white teacher. I have had the great pleasure of spending time with them all, long before Jacinta got into politics. Jacinta has had an extraordinary life, but above all, she has lived and breathed both the joy and the nightmare of life in remote Indigenous communities. She's seen the violence firsthand. She's fought entrenched prejudice and injustices all her life, and she knows how to fix the problems. Plus, the Liberals had Rowan Dean, a former Labor heavyweight committed to improving the business life of Indigenous Australians. Again, a proud and talented Indigenous man who espouses common sense and the virtues of assimilation and integration, who denounces passionately the divisiveness of left-wing identity politics. Warren will be joining me here in a tick. The Voice referendum was emblematic of everything that is wrong with Anthony Albanese and the modern Labor Party. It was a vanity project born in the elitist undergraduate corridors of universities, oozing putrid neo-Marxist values, condescending, hateful, and, in my opinion, identical in many ways to the pro-Palestinian cause of the last 2 years. Just the latest iteration of self-flagellation and self-loathing, seeking to divide us by race and by culture. All the coalition had to do was keep the flame of the Voice alive, the no voice, keep the over 60% on board the coalition train, and remind them every single day that Labor are the enemy of common sense and the enemies of equality for all and everyday Australian values. That Labor have no interest in the struggles of the ordinary hard-working Australia, but are simply interested in their ideological struggles. Chris Bowen and his insane and utterly destructive net zero schemes, driven entirely by ideology. Tanya Plibersek literally blocking billion-dollar gold mines and other crucial potential investments because of Indigenous pagan myths and because of ideology. Jim Chalmers and his insane fabricated tax on phantom profits, this unrealised capital gains, a grotesque product straight out of the tutorial rooms of sweaty, grubby undergraduate Marxist economics classes, driven entirely by ideology. Mass immigration onto our shores with no concern for the damage to the housing market and jobs prospects, driven entirely by ideology. Penny Wong demonising our ally Israel and overturning a long-standing support for that proud nation at the United Nations, driven entirely by ideology. Because make no mistake, that's all Labor are, to me. So many are politically illiterate, arrogant, sanctimonious, authoritarian ideologues, many of whom have never held a proper job and simply wanted to leech off the system while they wallow in their ideological fantasies, regardless of the chaos and havoc they are inflicting on this nation. The coalition had one job, and one job only: to take that 61% majority, nurture them, reassure them, and stay with them through to the election on every single issue, just like Donald Trump did in his election. To nurture them and reassure them on whether or not, biological men should be allowed in girls' schools sports, on whether or not there should be only one flag, on whether or not we should ditch welcome to countries, acknowledgements of countries, and all the other leftist Indigenous paraphernalia, on pulling out of the Paris Accord and abandoning net zero in order to breathe life back into our manufacturing industries and give small businesses a chance again to thrive and survive, on putting coal and gas back into the mix to immediately lower family household bills, on slashing red, green and black tape to allow ideas and innovation, agriculture and mining to thrive again, on getting insane woke DEI garbage out of our armies, police forces and other critical services. It couldn't have been easier. All the Libs had to do was speak common sense, not run away and quiver in terror every time a cultural issue was mentioned. Not cower like cowards at the mere mention of Donald Trump. On what planet are you living in? What ludicrous Canberra bubble are you existing if you seriously think it is a problem for Jacinta Price to say she wants to make Australia great again? I urged, both in person and in the Spectator Australia, the coalition to warn Australians that a re-elected Labor government would, as Rebecca Weiser wrote, introduce the voice by stealth. Indeed, Marita Punchin warned Australians back in February in her prescient Spectator Australia article entitled "The Trojan Horse" that Albanese's activists had not given up on the voice. They would not let it go. I urged the Dutton team to point the finger at Albanese during the debate here on Sky and demand that he promise a Labor government would never revisit the voice. I was ignored. And then what happened on Wednesday, only 3 days before Election Day? We learned that the most ideologically driven, the most arrogantly, dangerously socialist member of the Cabinet, the most sanctimonious and insufferable member of the Cabinet, dared to say this.
He thought it was the right thing to do, and a lot of the First Nations leaders wanted the opportunity. So, look, I think we'll look back on it in 10 years' time and it'll be a bit like marriage equality, don't you reckon? Like I always used to say, marriage equality, which took us such a bloody fight to get that done, and I thought, all this fuss, it'll become something. It'll be like people go, do we have an argument about that? They won't even like it. Kids today or even adults today barely kind of clock that it used to be an issue. Remember how big an issue that was in culture wars?
The sickly condescension of Penny Wong is almost breathtaking in its audacity. Firstly, to compare the same-sex marriage plebiscite, which voted yes, to the voice referendum, which comprehensively voted no, shows just how contemptuous these people are of the Australian voter. Worse, somebody could only think and speak like this if they are the product of the Gramsci school of neo-Marxism, viewing themselves as the sole arbiters of what is right and wrong and engage in a perpetual struggle against the oppressive forces of the silent majority. There you have, in those 35 seconds, the entire curriculum of modern tertiary education writ large. We of the left know best, and you, the little people, with your silly little jobs and your silly little traditions and values and ideas, are just an irritation, an inconvenience. And we, the authoritarians of the left, will just keep on pushing and pushing until we get our way. So tonight, we sit on the threshold of a Labor or Labor Greens government after the most inept, bland, fatuous and depressing election campaign in recent history. But still, I say there is a slim chance the coalition can win, but it requires every Aussie with a grain of sense to do what the coalition have failed to do, to drive home to your friends, family, colleagues and neighbours the frightening consequences to our nation if Labor is permitted to cross the line. Tomorrow will be a big day. Tomorrow night will be gruelling. But go out tomorrow, support all those volunteers who have manned the booths to protect our democracy and tick the right boxes, because at the end of the day, it's still up to us. Let's give Albo the elbow. Say no to the voice and give Albo the elbow. Axe the super tax and give Albo the elbow. Want to make Australia great again? Give Albo the elbow. The coalition may be far from perfect, but Labor re-elected will be an unmitigated disaster.